The air was thick with silence, broken only by the harsh screech of leaves crunching beneath a heavy footfall. The forest had never felt so vast, so suffocating. Time seemed to stretch, every second feeling like a lifetime. Max, a German shepherd, lay in the underbrush, his body trembling, eyes wide with terror as he strained against the cruel steel of the hunting trap that clamped down on his leg. His once proud posture was now shattered, the strength he once held in his muscular frame now a distant memory. Each breath he took was sharp, ragged, his chest rising and falling with frantic desperation. He could smell the damp earth beneath him, hear the occasional snap of a twig as the wind pushed through the trees. But everything felt distant, unreal. His leg, pinned mercilessly by the trap, throbbed with pain. The weight of the situation pressed down on him, and he wondered if anyone would come. Would anyone hear his silent pleas for help? His once vibrant fur, now matted with dirt and streaks of blood, clung to his body, but no one was there. The distant echo of birdsong no longer filled him with comfort. It was a cruel reminder of how alone he truly was. The forest had always been Max's sanctuary, a place where he thrived, where every rustle of the leaves or whisper of the wind told a story. He knew the scent of every tree, the call of every bird, the rhythm of the flowing river. Max had spent his life roaming the wild, hunting, running, feeling the earth beneath his paws. It was in this very wilderness that he had been raised, and it had always been a world of safety and certainty. But now, with a sharp snap, that world shattered. Max's body jolted violently as the trap clamped down on his leg. The sharp metal teeth bit into his flesh, locking him in place with an unforgiving grip. The initial shock of pain surged through him, his body rigid, as his breath caught in his throat. He couldn't move. His leg was caught, trapped by the cruel jaws of the hunting device. Panic surged through his veins, an overwhelming wave of helplessness. He tugged at the trap instinctively, his muscles straining as the metal cut deeper into his flesh. The pain was intense, a fiery pulse that threatened to overwhelm him. Max's mind raced as his eyes darted around the forest. What had happened? How had he gotten here? His once certain footing had betrayed him, and now, lying on the forest floor, his body immobilized, he could feel the earth beneath him shifting in unfamiliar ways. The scent of fresh pine and damp earth, which usually brought him comfort, now felt cold and suffocating. The wind, once a gentle companion, now seemed cruel as it whipped through the trees, mocking his helplessness. Max's once proud stance was reduced to a trembling heap, his body sprawled in the dirt. His breathing grew heavier, and he winced with each movement of his trapped leg. The pain was unbearable, but even worse was the sense of isolation that gnawed at him. The forest, which had once been his domain, now felt like a vast and indifferent expanse. The silence around him pressed in, thick and suffocating. His eyes flickered across the trees, seeking any sign of life, but all he saw were shadows. He wanted to call out, to bark, to break the silence with a cry for help. But his voice caught in his throat, his mouth dry and parched from the overwhelming stress. Max's body trembled, the shock of his situation causing him to lose control over his movements. He was alone, caught in the wilderness, and no one knew where he was. The realization hit him like a cold wave. He was completely alone. No pack to turn to, no familiar faces, no sense of community. Just him and the forest, which for the first time in his life felt like a hostile, alien place. His mind flickered with thoughts of survival. He had always managed to escape danger, always found a way out, always managed to stay one step ahead. But now, as the trap held him firmly in place, the weight of his own vulnerability hit him harder than the pain in his leg. The forest had always been his ally, but now it was a cold, uncaring observer. The trees, once towering symbols of protection, now loomed overhead like silent witnesses to his suffering. The leaves rustled faintly in the breeze, but to Max, the sound seemed distant, removed. The world around him felt too quiet, too still. Every noise, every shift of air seemed magnified, piercing the silence like an uninvited guest. Max's breath grew shallow, the pain in his leg becoming unbearable with each passing moment. He tugged again at the trap, but the metal only dug deeper into his flesh, cutting through his skin. The blood seeped from the wound, staining the dirt beneath him, but he couldn't move. His leg, once strong and proud, was now a dead weight, an anchor that held him in place, unable to break free. His mind, sharp and alert just moments ago, felt clouded with pain and exhaustion. The struggle to escape, to break free from the trap, was all-consuming, and yet it felt like a futile effort. Max's ears perked as he caught a faint sound. A rustle in the distance, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. His heart skipped a beat. Was it a person? A fellow animal? He strained his ears, his senses sharpening despite the pain. But the sound was faint, distant. It could have been the wind, or a bird fluttering through the branches. He couldn't be sure. He wanted to call out, wanted to bark, to do anything that might attract attention. But his throat was dry, his voice failing him. His only option was to remain still and hope, praying that someone, anyone, would find him. The scent of the forest around him was both familiar and foreign now. The earthy smell of moss and damp wood filled his nostrils, but there was something else, something sharper, something that tugged at his senses. A scent that wasn't supposed to be there. It was faint at first, a wisp of something unfamiliar, and then it grew stronger. The scent of human presence. Max's heart thudded in his chest, and he strained to listen, to focus on the source of the sound. Could it be someone coming to help him? Hope surged within him, an ember flickering in the dark abyss of despair. But the pain in his leg pulled him back to reality, the cold bite of the trap reminding him that help wasn't guaranteed. Even if someone did come, how would they find him? The forest was vast, the trees thick and unyielding. The thought of being left here, trapped and alone, filled him with dread. He could feel the weight of the forest around him pressing in, but there was still that scent. Still that flicker of hope. Max's eyes narrowed as he turned his head toward the sound, toward the scent. His mind raced with a mix of fear and hope, the two emotions colliding within him. The air seemed to hold its breath as he waited, every muscle in his body tensed. Was it a person coming to his aid? Or was it just another trick of the wind? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he had no choice but to wait. He could only hope. He had no strength left to fight, no energy to escape. All he could do was hold on to that fleeting scent of hope, and pray it was enough. As the hours dragged on, the sun began its slow descent through the sky, casting a golden glow that only deepened the shadows around Max. The pain in his leg was a constant reminder of his situation, gnawing at him with every breath, every heartbeat. His body felt heavy, as though the weight of the world had been pressed upon him. The once proud muscles that carried him effortlessly through the wild now trembled with exhaustion, the sharp throb of the wound in his leg searing through him like an unrelenting fire. Max's mind began to drift, each moment blurring into the next. Time, once so familiar and steady, had become a foreign concept. He couldn't tell if it had been minutes or hours since he'd first been trapped. The world around him seemed to shift with each passing second, a cruel dance between the occasional rustle of the wind and the deafening silence that followed. His eyes fluttered, the lids heavy, his mind struggling to hold on to any shred of consciousness. But every time he tried to close them, the reality of his predicament slammed back into him, forcing him to stay awake. The pain was his constant companion, wrapping around him like a vice. He couldn't move his leg, and even the smallest shift of his body sent shock waves of agony through his frame. His once steady breath had become shallow, each intake of air a struggle, his ribs pressing against his chest as though they too were trapped. The metallic scent of his blood mixed with the earthy aroma of the forest, the smell of his own suffering now filling the space around him. Max's muscles spasmed, the strain of holding himself still taking its toll. The trap had not only caught his leg, but it had also caught his spirit. It was as though every attempt at escape only served to weaken him further, as if the very act of struggling made him more vulnerable. His strength, once so reliable, had started to fade. The will to escape was there, but the power to do so seemed just out of reach. The more he tried to fight, the more helpless he became. His ears perked again, straining to catch any sound that might signal help. But all he heard was the quiet hum of the forest, the occasional bird call, the soft rustling of branches in the breeze. The wind had picked up, colder now, brushing against his fur with an almost indifferent touch. The forest seemed to grow darker, the shadows stretching long and eerie as the sun dipped lower behind the horizon. Max's heart began to pound in his chest, a rhythmic drumbeat that echoed in his ears. The darkness seemed to close in around him, and with it came a new wave of terror. His throat constricted as the sensation of being utterly alone washed over him. The wilderness that had once been his home now felt like a prison. The isolation that had once been a comforting silence was now suffocating. The world was vast, and he was a small, insignificant part of it. His mind wandered to the past, to the days when he roamed freely, his legs strong and unburdened. He had never imagined a moment like this, never considered the possibility that he might find himself vulnerable, weak. In his pack, he had always been the one to protect, the one who led the way. But now, in the cold grip of the trap, he was nothing but prey. The realization gnawed at him, a bitter pill lodged in his throat. The forest, which had once been a place of safety, had become a place of cruelty. The panic, once a whisper in the back of his mind, grew louder now. Max's thoughts became more erratic, his breath coming faster as the reality of his situation pressed in on him. He wanted to scream, to bark, to do anything to alert someone, but the words caught in his throat, lodged like a stone in the back of his mouth. He felt the weight of the silence around him, and it suffocated him, turning the once peaceful forest into a place of dread. His leg throbbed, the pain now a dull ache that seemed to spread through his body. His strength was fading, his will to fight beginning to wane. The trap had taken everything from him, his body, his spirit, his hope. He had always been a fighter, always relied on his instincts to get him through the toughest situations. But now, it felt as though he was fighting against something far greater than himself. The trap was a beast that had no mercy, no pity, and with each passing moment, it seemed to pull him deeper into its grip. Max could feel himself growing weaker, his limbs growing heavy and unresponsive. His head drooped, and for a moment, he wondered if he could just drift into unconsciousness, let the darkness take him. Perhaps the pain would stop then. Perhaps the world would fade away, and he would no longer feel the burden of survival pressing against him. But there was still that flicker of hope, that faint scent that lingered in the air, the possibility that someone might find him. It wasn't much, but it was all he had left. His eyes scanned the trees once more, searching for any sign of movement. The darkness of the forest seemed to press in on him, suffocating him, making it harder to think. But then, as if in answer to his desperate prayers, he heard it, a sound. A faint rustle, the crack of a twig. His heart leaped, and for a moment he forgot the pain. His ears twitched, straining to catch the sound again. Was it a human? Was it someone coming to help? Max's body trembled with renewed hope, but the pain in his leg brought him back to reality. His muscles screamed in protest as he tried to move, but the trap held him fast. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was near. He fought to keep his eyes open, to stay alert, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. His eyelids fluttered, and his breath grew shallow as he tried to focus on the sound. It was close now, closer than before. The crack of another branch, the faint shuffle of footsteps. But was it real? Was it the help he had been praying for, or just the wind playing tricks on his mind? Max's heart pounded in his chest as he strained to listen. The sound was closer now. His body felt weak, his strength slipping away, but he couldn't give in. Not yet. Not when there was a chance, however small, that someone might hear him, find him, save him. Max's heart pounded in his chest as the sound of footsteps drew closer. His senses, dulled by the passage of time and the weight of his pain, snapped into sharp focus. His ears perked up, straining to catch the subtle crackle of twigs beneath the weight of someone, or something, approaching. The scent of a human, something unfamiliar yet strangely comforting, drifted through the air, cutting through the thick veil of his pain. His breath caught in his throat, his body still, muscles rigid with anticipation. Was it real? Was it a dream born from his desperation? Max's eyes darted around frantically, the shadows of the trees stretching long and dark in the dwindling light of dusk. His body trembled with the hope that surged through him. The pain in his leg momentarily forgotten, his mind, clouded with exhaustion, struggled to cling to the flicker of possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, someone was coming to rescue him. The thought seemed too good to be true. But it was all he had left. The air around him seemed to hold its breath as the rustling drew nearer. The unmistakable crunch of boots in the underbrush signaling the arrival of something, or someone, he had been waiting for. Max strained to make himself heard, but his throat was dry, his voice lost in the stillness. He tried to move, to break free from the trap, but the steel jaws held him firmly in place, his leg trapped in the cruel grip. He could barely move it, the weight of his own body pressing down on him, but he refused to surrender. He had to make it known. Someone had to see him. His eyes searched the shadows, watching for any sign of movement. There it was, a figure, emerging from the trees. A man. He was dressed in dark clothing, moving cautiously, his steps hesitant yet determined. Max's body tensed, his chest tight with both hope and disbelief. Could it be? Could this stranger be the one to pull him from the jaws of death? The man's face, illuminated by the soft light of the fading day, showed a mixture of surprise and concern. He paused, his gaze meeting Max's for a long moment, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of the injured dog lying in the dirt. The man's face softened with understanding, and he moved closer, crouching down to Max's level. The pain in Max's leg flared again, but the presence of the man brought a new sense of urgency to his body. This was it. This was his chance. Max let out a low whine, his breath shallow, his heart racing. The man's eyes flickered to the trap, and Max could see the recognition in his gaze. The same understanding that Max had felt since the moment he had been trapped. It was a hunting trap designed to hold the strongest of animals, and yet it had caught him. The man didn't waste any time. He knelt beside Max, his hands moving gently yet swiftly to assess the situation. Max's body tensed instinctively at the proximity, but the man's calm presence put him at ease. The man's hands were steady, experienced. He had done this before, perhaps many times. Max could feel the warmth of the man's touch as he carefully examined the trap, his fingers brushing against Max's fur. It was a sensation Max hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. A human touch that wasn't laced with fear, a touch that was meant to help, not harm. The man spoke softly, his voice calm but filled with a quiet urgency. "It's going to be okay," the man murmured, though Max could sense the uncertainty in his voice. "I'm here. I'm going to get you out of this." The words were a lifeline, a whisper of reassurance that Max held onto with all his strength. He wanted to believe them. He had to. The man's hands worked quickly, his fingers moving with practiced precision as he pried open the trap. Max flinched, the sharp pain from his leg sending a jolt through his body, but the man didn't hesitate. He was careful, but there was a clear sense of urgency to his movements, as if he knew that every second mattered. Max's eyes never left the man's face as he continued to work, the bond between them growing stronger with each passing moment. For the first time in hours, Max allowed himself to hope. His heart still raced, but it was no longer from fear. It was the slow, steady beat of life returning to his body. With a final, sharp tug, the trap released, and Max's leg was free. The weight of the metal was gone, and Max could finally breathe without the suffocating grip of the trap constricting his chest. His leg felt like a dead weight at first, the muscles stiff and unresponsive, but as he shifted slightly, he could feel the rush of blood returning to his body. It was a strange, almost painful sensation, but it was also a relief. The wound on his leg was raw, deep, but the pain was no longer unbearable. It was a reminder that he had survived, that he had made it through. Max's body sagged with exhaustion as the man gently helped him to a sitting position. He could barely lift his head, but the man's hand was there, steadying him. Max's heart still pounded, but it was no longer out of fear. It was a rhythm of recovery, of survival. "You're safe now," the man whispered again, his voice soft but filled with conviction. Max's eyes fluttered closed for a moment as he allowed himself to rest. The sound of the man's voice, the warmth of his touch, the sense of relief flooding through him. It was all so overwhelming. Max had never truly understood the power of human kindness until now. He had always been self-reliant, had always prided himself on being independent. But in this moment, as he leaned against the man's side, he realized that sometimes it was okay to need help. Max's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths as he rested, his mind floating in and out of clarity. The world around him had slowed, the pain in his leg fading into the background as the man spoke soothingly to him, his words a soft balm against the harsh reality of his situation. The sky above had turned a deep shade of purple as the first stars began to appear, their twinkling light a reminder that night was falling. But Max didn't feel the cold anymore. Not now. Not when the warmth of this stranger's presence was enough to melt away the fear that had clung to him for so long. And, as he closed his eyes for the first time in what felt like forever, he realized that this was it. The flicker of hope he had clung to had become a flame, steady and strong. The man's face was still there, a beacon of light in the darkness, offering him a future, a chance at life. Max wasn't alone anymore. The forest around Max seemed to hold its breath as the man carefully helped him move, his legs unsteady but no longer trapped. Max's head swam in a fog of exhaustion, but he was no longer lost in the isolation and pain that had plagued him for hours. He was alive. He was free. And for the first time since the trap had clamped down on him, he could feel hope curling like a warm ember inside his chest. It wasn't over, though, not yet. He was still far from safety. The man, steady and calm, kept his hands firm but gentle on Max's body, guiding him through the forest, helping him navigate the uneven ground beneath them. The air felt different now, no longer oppressive and thick with the weight of the forest's indifference, but open, as if a barrier had been removed. The trees, once looming shadows, now stood around them like silent sentinels. The sky above, once a sharp, cold blue, had softened into the dim hues of twilight, and for the first time in hours, Max could see. Max's leg throbbed, but it was no longer the blinding, overwhelming pain that had paralyzed him earlier. The wound still pulsed with a dull ache, but it was bearable now. He could move, albeit slowly, but he was moving. Each step was a victory, every shift of his body a silent promise that he was on the mend. Still, as he stumbled forward with the man's help, the forest felt vast, stretching out endlessly in every direction. They weren't out of danger yet. Max's ears twitched as he picked up a new sound. A distant growl, low and ominous, reverberated through the trees. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, and a flash of fear flickered in his chest. The man must have heard it too, as his grip tightened on Max's fur, his body stiffening. Max turned his head, his eyes scanning the woods around them, but all he saw were the shadows of the trees, thick and impenetrable. The air had changed again, this time heavy with the scent of something predatory. A rustle, quick and sharp, cut through the silence. The man's head snapped toward the sound, his eyes narrowing. Max's body went rigid with instinct, a predator. Another hunter. They had come too close to the territory of a pack. The man had only just freed him from one trap, but now, it seemed they were walking into another. Max's heart rate quickened, and he could feel his instincts rising, demanding to be heard. The pack was close. They were hunting. A part of Max, the wild part that had always been in him, wanted to flee, to run as fast as he could, to escape the danger. But he couldn't. Not like this. Not with his legs still weak and trembling under him. He was exposed, vulnerable, and if they didn't act fast, he and the man would be easy prey. The growl came again. Closer now. It rumbled through the ground beneath them, a deep, guttural sound that sent shivers through Max's body. He wasn't alone. There were more, perhaps a dozen or more, and they were closing in. Max's breath caught in his throat as the man looked at him, his eyes filled with urgency. He knew what needed to be done. Stay close. The man muttered, his voice low but filled with command. Max looked up at him, his head swirling with the overwhelming urge to protect, to fight, but his body still felt sluggish, his strength drained by the ordeal he had just endured. There was no time to rest. There was no time for weakness. The man quickly assessed the situation, his eyes darting around them, searching for a place to hide or a way out. Max's body trembled with the strain of standing, his weakened leg barely able to hold him up. But then the man did something unexpected. He lowered to one knee, his hand on Max's head, and locked eyes with him, as if trying to communicate something deeper than words. "You're not alone anymore," the man whispered. The words felt like a promise. "We'll fight together." Max's gaze softened, and for the first time in hours, He felt something stir deep within him, a desire to protect this man who had freed him. The forest around them was no longer a place of survival. It was a battleground. And for the first time, Max didn't feel so alone. With a quick movement, the man rose to his feet, his hand still resting on Max's shoulder as he stood beside him. The growl was almost deafening now, the sound vibrating through the earth beneath them. Max's ears flattened, his body coiled like a spring, ready to act. He could sense the pack's approach, the shift in the air, the change in the rhythm of the forest. Max's heart thudded in his chest as he stared into the darkening woods. He could see the faint outlines of the wolves, shadows slipping between the trees, their eyes gleaming in the dimming light. The man's hand tightened around a stick, a crude weapon, but it was all he had. The wolves were closing in, their growls growing louder, the tension between predator and prey palpable. Max could feel the thrum of the wild inside him, the need to fight, to protect, to survive. He stepped forward, his legs shaking, but his resolve solid. He couldn't run. Not anymore. This time, he would face the fight. This time, he would defend the man who had given him a chance when he had none. The first wolf broke from the shadows, its eyes locked on Max. Its mouth curled into a snarl as it lunged forward, but Max was faster. With a burst of adrenaline, he leaped to the side, his body moving with a grace that surprised even him. He heard the snap of the wolf's teeth as it missed him by inches, its growl of frustration echoing through the trees. Max's instincts kicked in, and he twisted, his body a blur of motion as he met the wolf head-on, his jaws snapping just as the creature's fangs clashed in the air. The man swung the stick, catching the second wolf off guard, the sharp crack of the blow ringing through the night. The wolves hesitated for a moment, unsure of the new threat before them. Max and the man were a unit now, fighting side by side, driven by the same will to survive. The wolves were not just predators anymore. They were a challenge, an obstacle between them and freedom. Max's teeth sank into the wolf's shoulder, and the beast let out a sharp yelp. It staggered back, but Max held firm, his grip unrelenting. The man's voice, steady and commanding, rang out behind him, directing their movements, guiding them through the chaos. Together, they fought as one. The pack began to retreat, their growls now tinged with uncertainty. The man's calm resolve, combined with Max's relentless fighting spirit, had turned the tide. The wolves, once so confident, began to slink back into the shadows, their retreat slow and deliberate. Max stood tall, his body battered but victorious, his chest heaving as the last of the wolves disappeared into the forest. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating, but it was a different kind of silence now. It wasn't the silence of isolation. It wasn't the silence of despair. It was the silence of survival. The man stood beside Max, his eyes meeting his with a quiet nod. They had fought together, and they had won. Max's legs still ached, but the adrenaline of the battle had masked the pain. As he looked up at the man, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, a bond that had formed in the heat of the fight. They had faced the pack, and together they had overcome. And in that moment, Max knew that he wasn't alone anymore. He had found a protector, a partner, someone who had risked everything to save him. As the night stretched on, Max leaned against the man, his body exhausted but his spirit stronger than ever. The forest around them was no longer a place of danger, but a place of survival, a place where Max knew he could thrive once more. The battle had passed, but the tension lingered. Max's body ached, every step still a reminder of the fight he had just endured. The wolves were gone, driven off by the man's strength and Max's resolve. The forest was silent now, save for the faint whisper of the wind through the trees. Max's legs still throbbed, but the pain was no longer overwhelming. It was manageable. A distant hum beneath the adrenaline that still coursed through his veins. As the night deepened, the man helped Max settle beneath the thick canopy of a nearby tree. The darkness of the forest had shifted again. It no longer felt like a prison. The stars above, once distant and cold, now felt like a comforting blanket, wrapping them in a sense of safety. The man's steady presence beside him was the anchor Max had been searching for. Someone to trust, someone to help him heal. The man worked quickly, using his makeshift supplies to bandage Max's leg, his touch gentle and reassuring. Max's eyes fluttered, closed for a moment, the weight of the days sinking in. His body was still weak, but his mind was clear. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Max allowed himself to rest, to surrender to the care that had been given to him. The pain in his leg faded slowly, replaced by a sense of calm. His breathing evened out, his heart no longer racing in fear. He had been given another chance at life, at healing. The man had become more than just a rescuer. He had become a companion, a symbol of hope in the darkest of times. Max's head rested on the man's lap as the forest whispered around them, a lullaby of survival, of recovery. They had fought together, and together they would heal.